Hey guys, what's up? Sandu here, and today I'll be testing a high-end portable digital audio player of Hiby Music that is called RS6 that goes for $13.99 bucks. It uses a super fast system on chip, an unlocked version of Android 9.0, an R-2R ladder DAC will be converting those zeros and ones, and plenty of sound enhancements are being provided so you can tune it to your liking. As usual, let's check how it looks, what makes it tick, and then how it sounds. Let's go! In terms of looks, I appreciate that Hiby is sticking with a time-tested design that can be found on their latest DAPs, but what I like the most about it is that you'll find buttons only on its right side. After touching and playing with it for about 2 weeks, I'm liking its minimalist layout, as I never missed a button blindly when I'm going outside for a walk. Instead of using a machined aluminum alloy case, Hiby went one step further, exchanging it with a pure copper case that added some weight to it. I must add that its official pictures aren't doing it justice, as its sandblasted copper case looks and feels absolutely gorgeous. Besides its full copper roll cage, you'll find a glass sheet on top that was cut to its body shape, and a carbon fiber look was added on its back. Hiby went with a 5-inch Full HD screen that is bright, colorful, and offers good viewing angles. It's enough for light web browsing and music streaming on the go using third-party apps as Qobuz, Tidal, Spotify, and others. At this size, you can certainly do some light gaming on the go and watch some YouTube videos, as its newest silicone is more than capable of handling harder tasks. As for controls, on top you can spot a volume wheel, on its left side a single micro SD card slot, on its right side you'll find on-off, play, pause, next and previous buttons, and all the inputs and outputs were moved to its bottom. There you'll find your balanced and single-ended line out. A USB Type-C sits exactly in the middle, used for charging and data transfer, and on the right you'll have your usual single-ended and 4.4 balanced headphone jacks. As for tech inside it, we're dealing here with a much faster Snapdragon 660 that feels like multitasking on a modern smartphone. An unlocked Android 9.0 is provided, so you can install any third-party apps you can possibly desire. RAM size went up to 4 gigs and 64 gigs of ROM memory is on board, out of which 50 gigs are being provided as music storage, and if you'd like to expand it, just use a microSD card up to 2 TB in size. However, the most interesting aspect about RS6 is that we're dealing here with an advanced Darwin architecture that combines an R-2R ladder DAC and a powerful DSP that is providing FEAR filters, nonlinear harmonics control, switchable oversampling and non-oversampling modes, DSD bypass, and plenty of sound enhancements that are working on a hardware level. Going forward to the amp stage, a discrete current mode amplification stage is implemented via a single OPA 1642 and 2 OPA 1612, followed by 4 OPA 1622 op-amps for a fully balanced configuration. RS6 will be providing up to 690 mW in 32 ohms via its balanced output and up to 180 mW via its single-ended output. Hiby added a full MQA decoder, full Bluetooth codec support as UAT and LDAC, plus 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi. Pretty cool specs, right? But let's check how it actually performs. Moving on to sound performance, the moment I've seen a ladder of R-2R resistors, and of course a powerful FPGA that will be controlling those resistors, was the moment when I realized that RS6 is not your usual digital audio player, it's something else, it's very unique from multiple points of view. It so happens that the absolute best DACs that I tried at my place are also using a ladder of resistors and a powerful FPGA, like Rockna Wavelight, Denafrips Terminator Plus, Musician, Aquarius, and many others. And as you can possibly expect, I was very curious to try out the RS6, and I'm glad I did. Secondly, it's a little bit complicated telling you exactly how RS6 is sounding because it offers so many sound enhancements, so you can tune it very, very deeply. For example, you can change its tonality from cold to warm, you can alter its bass extension, its bass texture, note thickness, vocal performance, you can make your trebles softer or sharper. And on top of that, several plugins have been offered and many others can be downloaded and installed. You can increase or decrease that soundstage. You can use oversampling or native non-oversampling mode. Bottom line is that you can tune it to your liking. You can enable and disable plenty of effects, plugins, and other things. Something that I've never experienced before on any other DAP. And for all of these reasons combined, I decided reviewing it in its stock form without enabling any kind of DSP. Sound-wise, immediately I felt that it has an amazing flow, so everything just poured slowly and naturally towards my ears. There was zero grain, there was any kind of listening fatigue, sitting almost on the opposite pole to something like a FiiO M11 Plus ESS version or M17. While M11 Plus goes with a very high transparency, fast transients, a very high detail retrieval, I believe that RS6 is basically on the poles apart, so it goes for organic textures, for naturalness, for just a full-bodied representation. It always had that, effortlessness. It sounded just a little bit shyer in terms of soundstage in the first days, but it was always easygoing, unrestrained sounding at all times. For some reasons, it actually reminds me about the sound of the Shinling M8, the big one, because they share quite a few things in common. But the most important aspect of the RS6, I believe that it is very lifelike tonality or timbre. There is no digitus, there is no listening fatigue, so nothing like that. It doesn't have any sharp edges, so you'll be getting plenty of meat on the bone, some warmth, and a pleasing tonality that will never tire you down. Moving on to noise floor, Hiby Music is not specifying its exact noise floor in microvolts. I believe only total harmonic distortion is being provided, meaning that I'll need to test it the hard way with plenty of ultra-sensitive IEMs. So I went directly on the 4.4mm jack, high gain, full power, because at maximum volume you should have the highest noise floor. Luckily, with a pair of FiiO FI9 put in their high sensitivity mode, I couldn't detect any kind of noise. It was simply noiseless. Background was super black. Gremlins weren't really playing in the background, so no complaints in here. On 3.5mm jack on the single-ended one, again, high gain, maximum power. I couldn't detect any kind of noise with all my IEMs. I already did my tests with third-party apps like this one, like Qobuz, like Tidal, Spotify, but luckily I couldn't detect any kind of noise because it performed pretty much the same. And this is pretty much a big deal because you can use your entire IEM collection, you can use your sensitive desktop headphones like Focals, like Apos Caspian, like Kenerton headphones, because all those will be just noiseless, distortion-free, just an amazing performance when it comes to repelling all types of noise. Moving on to power output, it offers almost 700 milliwatts and 32 ohms on its balanced out, and while on paper it doesn't sound like a lot of power, right? It was more than enough with most of my headphones, with the exception of two tiny headphones. So throwing IEMs portable over ears, all my dynamic driver headphones wasn't really a problem because it drove them all with no exception whatsoever. So maximum I could go volume wise was around 60 out of 100 with the Kenerton Valley, with Apos Caspian, with the RZH Mania. So again, leaving plenty of headroom on tap. It was nicely controlling those drivers. I had an amazing transit response. I had all the signs that all those headphones are sounding really nice. Moving on to planar magnetic headphones, these two right here, Mesa Elite and Kenerton Rogner, worked just outstanding, and sincerely, these two were the headphones that I used the most with the RS6. Not even IEMs, because these two worked really outstanding. Maximum I could go was around 70, maybe sometimes 75 with some high dynamic range tracks. So again, plenty of headroom was remaining on top. Bass was easily reaching 20 Hz notes. I had a very good transient response. Dynamics were impressive, so I had all the signs that these two sounded really nice out of this one. Only when I moved to the Odyssey LCD4, I was reaching at around, 80 to 85 volume-wise, sometimes with some high, crazy dynamic range tracks like classical music, blues and jazz. I could almost touch its maximum volume, so I wasn't getting that LCD4 sounding exactly how I know them on my desktop headphone amplifiers. So that one didn't sound so great. It was a little bit restrained in terms of dynamics. And of course, Hiby Mansuswara, again, it doesn't have enough juice with those two headphones, but considering its small size and the fact that portable DAPs weren't really made for hard-to-drive planar magnetics, it just performed above my expectations. Moving on to Soundstage, let's zoom out just a little bit. You probably know me by now, maybe you don't, but I have a slight obsession with desktop DACs. I have plenty around me, 1-bit, Delta Sigma, FPGA, R-2R, and I believe from all those technologies, R-2R ladder DACs with an FPGA at the end to control all that ladder of resistors are sounding pretty much the biggest, the deepest, with the nicest imaging, with the nicest pinpoint location of the notes. And I believe that RS6 is actually no different to those DACs. It's very impressive in here. It always very layered, quite deep sounding, always, adding a lot of air in between the notes. It wasn't like that in the first days. It was quite shy actually. It didn't have a lot of dynamics, bass wasn't going deep, and it sounded just quite claustrophobic, quite, upfront. But right now there is nothing like that. 2 weeks later, it doesn't sound like that. And mind you, I'm describing its sound without any kind of DSP, without any kind of plugins and effects. But after enabling those effects with something like a Fire FH9, I could make them sound almost like full-sized open back headphones. You can choose the width of the soundstage, you can make it narrower, you can make it much wider, you can enhance that depth. So if you want, you can make it very big sounding, which is quite impressive. I believe only Shanling M8 and Fire M17 can challenge it in here. Otherwise, Shanling M6 version 21, Fire M11 Pro, M11 Plus, all those cannot compete in here in terms of soundstage. And while M11 Plus offers a little bit, it's bigger, it's heavier, M11 Plus, it offers a little bit more power on top on the single-ended output. It cannot compete with this one when it comes to layering, when it comes to soundstage. This one sounded just bigger, and that was quite apparent with all my headphones, but especially with these ones, with desktop ones, because it never limited their air travel in the room. Even with tiny IEMs, music just flew far and wide, and crowded tracks were no longer closed in and personal. In terms of transients, I believe that dynamics is the key word with the RS6, because its low end is it's more impactful. It's actually above head and shoulders to the rest of the frequency response. Yes, it's a little bit elevated in the bass, but who cares? It's very fun, very engaging sounding in the bass. And that actually works as a small cure with several headphones, especially with the HE1000 SE and with the Mezi Elite, because it makes them, more impactful, more engaging sounding in a way. And as I was saying, I've used it a lot more with desktop class headphones, especially with planars, because it just sounded very great with them, above my expectations. And while that Fire M11 Plus is a little bigger, maybe a little bit more powerful, it sounded more impressive in here in terms of transients, especially when it comes to bass slam, when it comes to the final punch. And the same can be said about the Shanling M6 version 21, because this one was more impressive in here, but that shouldn't come as a surprise considering that it's considerably costlier compared to those two units. I believe that it's more impressive when it comes to landing punches, when it comes to bass slam, and a little less when it comes to speed, but still very impressive in this department, so no complaints in here. It delivered a great rumble down low in the bass, so I never felt that it was limiting dynamics or the transient response, and considering its size, sincerely, I cannot ask for more from such a tiny device. Moving on to detailed retrieval, if you research just a little bit about desktop class R-2R ladder DACs, then you'll observe that no matter how precise those resistors are, but considering that you are dealing with tens, sometimes even hundreds of resistors, the final outcome, the resolution, dynamic range, will be going down. And this is where a powerful FPGA could come to the rescue and reclock and reconstruct that signal, and again adding a little bit of dynamic range. And this is exactly how RS6 is doing by default. This is how it was by design in the first place. So while it doesn't sound exactly as detailed, as clean as a FIO M17, that was the cleanest DAP that I've experienced so far, it still wasn't that far behind. It didn't lag. It wasn't very behind that one. So it still was quite clean, quite noiseless. It didn't have any kind of distortion. But I believe the way the music is being played, being rendered, is very different compared to that one. While with N17 you have that sharp leading edges, sharp contours, it's very defined, very detailed in a way, very transparent. You know that a DA conversion is happening in real time because it sounds a little bit, fake maybe, too clean in a way. It sounds more detailed than how I know my music to sound. With this one, it's like you are going to a live concert, you are having a great time, you're having, a drink maybe, you are chatting with your friends, and your music is playing in the background. And you know that it sounds like in real life, your music. And you might like that, some people might dislike that, but this is exactly how RS6 is sounding with all my music. So it never moves those spotlights on small nuances, on micro details, on on the contours, but it focuses mostly on what's happening on the inside, on the macro scale. So engagement factor is more important with the RS6 compared to other DAPs. So it's not highlighting detailed retrieval, it never moves the spotlights towards the smallest nuances, as it wants to conquer your heart with its organic and natural timbre. Moving on to frequency response, after several days of burning, its bass output improved the most. I believe that I have right now around 2 weeks of burning, and right now the bass is weighty, it's airy, it's fast, punchy, and most importantly, it's quite layered, so I'm hearing several layers of bass with my electronic music. It can sustain longer bass notes, it can decay them fast or slow depending on the tracks that you are listening to. I can say with confidence that its bass output is slightly elevated compared to the rest of the frequency response, but I actually like that effect because it adds a little bit of fun, engagement factor, it's warmer sounding in a way, and that actually counterbalances plenty of headphones. It's very different sounding in here compared to the usual DAPs like ShineLink M6, like FIO M11 Plus. It's different, and this is what I like the most about it. Its mid-bass is even more elevated in a way, always attracting my attention to it, adding some warmth and a higher saturation in this region. While I didn't feel an overly smooth mid-range performance, it was always natural and velvety sounding in here, and I wouldn't expect anything less out of an R-2R ladder DAC that uses some of the warmest sounding OPA op amps in the business. And from all the DAPs that I've tried in about 3 years, I believe that Hiby RS6 doesn't have a fierce competition when it comes to mid-range, because it's juicier sounding in here and just more natural across the board. Those guitar strings carried a little bit more emotions, vocal performance was simply to die for, and this is definitely a soul-grabbing mid-range that highlights textures and inner details more than anything else. Its treble performance does remind me quite a lot about the sound of non-oversampling DACs, R-2R ladder DACs, and great sounding software-defined FPGA DACs. There is just an easiness, so an amazing flow. There is no brightness, there is no grain, there is no digitus, there is no hardness. So you can listen to your rock and metal all day long and it will never tire you down. I like this part quite a lot because it's clean, it's defined, but it's not overly sharp. So You can feel that brass, you can feel that, snare drum hits hitting your eardrums, but it will never be bothering in the long run. I can't call it rolled off in here, as there is plenty of presence and detail. It just isn't overdone, and it isn't attracting a lot of attention to it. As for my conclusions, I never believed that I could take with me a Denafrips Terminator Plus or a Rockna Wavelight in short or long trips, but I guess I was all wrong, because RS6 borrows plenty of tech from set converters, always choosing a natural flow, a higher engagement factor above anything else. And if there is a DAP that tries to elevate your mood, I truly believe that RS6 is exactly like that. It's impossible disliking its unique character, its hardware presets, plugins and sound enhancements that will be making it your own. There isn't a more feature-packed DAP today, and that's why I'm going to award it with my highest, Gold Award. Okay guys, my full in-depth review can be found below, please check it out. In case you want to support the channel, please subscribe to it, and as usual, listen to my music, be positive, and I'll see you around. Cheers!